If your child is only really interested in playing with cars, believe me, you're not alone. In fact, I meet so many marvellous kids who really are very keen on cars, or maybe trains. Something about wheels is really fun, right? So thank you, Evelyn, who asked this question in the comments of a previous video about how to help her child perhaps pay attention to her, shift the activity away from cars to something else. And so in this video, we're going to get into the why cars, how can we shift it, how can we maybe mix it up a little bit and give you guys some ideas along the way. So my first consideration would be thinking about what makes cars such an appealing activity for your kid. Is it the predictability and sameness of playing with cars? We often do very similar repeated routines when we're playing with cars. And for children who struggle with communication, that can be very reassuring, that can feel very safe and comfortable. And we all need opportunities to feel safe and comfy and like we know what's happening. And cars can often serve that purpose for some of the kids that I meet. Perhaps it's the sound effects that we play with cars, the crash, bang, whatever it is. Sound effects often are a big part of car play, and that is something that is always fun and motivating for kids. Kids who aren't talking can often make sound effects, and they might also hear the adults around them using cool sound effects, and that is just fun. Also, when we're playing with cars, we often don't use a lot of language. So again, cars can feel like quite a reassuring, safe activity for a child who's struggling with language because there isn't an overwhelming amount of talk and varied commentary about the cars. So that's another possibility thing to consider. Maybe cars is something that feels really successful for your child. So they might be keen to stick with that familiar known activity that they know they can do rather than move on to an activity that you're proposing that they might be less familiar with, less sure with, or even less successful with. Evelyn, in your question, you mentioned wanting to get your boy's attention, and I can seriously relate to this. I meet lots of children where developing attention is a key goal, and it's something that I support parents with through my Toddler Talk program because it's such a foundation part of communication development. So if you and I were chatting together, I'd want to ask, what kind of activities do you have in mind? What are the things that you're hoping to get his attention to play with you? And what are your kind of ultimate goals with that? Because the cars and your activity idea don't need to be mutually exclusive. We can kind of think about how we might weave them together. So if you're thinking about what is your goal for the activity, then maybe we can invite the cars along. How can we shift the car play just a little bit? Rather than cars are completely finished, let's move on to something entirely new, which is scary and unknown. How about we bring the cars along for some of that kind of new activity? So perhaps the cars might want to paint colourful tracks on paper, or perhaps the cars would like to transport some tiny Play-Doh balls, or perhaps the cars would like to go to a tea party or go to the car wash. The risk when we're proposing new activities to a child is that we end up using lots of talk. So whenever possible, I want to be able to show rather than tell. I want to be able to demonstrate what we're doing in the activity rather than explaining it all first with a ton of talk. And this would be the same for your car play. So instead of saying, hey kiddo, let's go and get the Play-Doh and make loads of tiny balls and transport them in our various trucks around the room. Instead, you can simply have some Play-Doh and make those balls and then add them to your car. And I say add them to your car because this is a really key part of something that I notice with lots of the children that I work with, is that they can appear like they don't want to play with you, or can appear very rigid in their play because they are worried that you're going to take the play away from them or change the play too much. So it's often really useful to have your own set or your own car that you can do something to. And then over time, you can notice the moments when your child is maybe showing some fleeting interest in what you're doing. So lots of the children that I work with still benefit hugely from child-led play. So it's very easy for us to think that us adults need to direct the play for a child to learn. But there is so much rich learning that happens when we can be really attentive and notice what a child's playing with, even if it is cars over and over. But think about what can your child tolerate to kind of shift the play a bit? Are they okay with your car maybe getting muddy and you having to, you know, wash it off with a toothbrush? Or what are the things that capture their attention? And I know you asked me this comment underneath my attention bucket video, so you're clearly thinking, okay, how can I find activities that are going to capture their attention? I think cars are going to capture their attention. Cars doing other cool stuff. So if your kid also loves playing with cars, do let us know in the comments so that we feel not alone in this. And whatever you plan, whatever activity you want to have a go at, also, just to acknowledge, I've been there and sometimes just all goes out the window, doesn't it? So, you know, sometimes I have to tell myself plans are overrated. As Adrienne Maree Brown would say, less prep, more presence. Spend the time with your child, noticing what they're into, and look for those tiny moments where maybe you can shift and or add or change things just a little bit. And if not, that's cool too. Thank you so much for your question, Evelyn. Thank you for being here. And remember, every tiny step we take together is a step in the right direction. So thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you next time.